Thank you. Mr. Treese, I assure you in Arizona, we covet the water you have in California, or Colorado, so, so anyway, it's all in where you are. I'm sorry for not being here earlier. There's a Gorsuch hearing going on just a few doors away, so that's occupying a lot of time. But it's nice to have Brad Worsley here. And thank you for making the trip from Arizona. In Arizona, we've had two once-in-a-lifetime fires in the last 15 years. And if you're from northern Arizona, as I am, I've seen the devastation that has occurred there. It's been a tough thing to watch. After the Rodeo Chediskai fire back 15 years ago, we realized that we needed industry in northern Arizona in order to partner with the federal government, or we simply weren't going to do the amount of forest restoration that we needed. And fortunately, some industry has stepped up to the plate, including Novo Power and others that Brad is very familiar with. We have to have private industry that is functioning, and the infrastructure that it's needed there, and the infrastructure that's needed in terms of roads and whatnot to get wood out of the forest is vital here. I want to thank Brad for serving on my Healthy Forest Advisory panel, and I'm looking forward to suggestions that you have. I've read the written testimony, but I was interested in hearing some about the role of transportation, the cost to your industry. You've advocated, or there's a pilot project in Arizona to increase weight limits on state roads. And I want to hear from you on how a similar program on federal highways could help the existing industry reach deeper into the forest and be able to treat those areas that need to be treated.
You bet. Let me first say, I know it's decorum to praise your local senators, but I have to tell you, Senator Flake and Senator McCain give us a disproportionate amount of time. I sat with the biomass group this morning, and they were just so shocked that I speak with them regularly and their efforts in our behalf. So we have definitely, we're appreciative of our two sitting senators. Over 50% of your cost to move biomass is in transportation. And so a small addition, a highway can handle, go from 80,000 pounds to 90,000 pounds, is a 20% increase in your haul capacity. So you're taking a 20% benefit on the largest expense in hauling biomass. And the state is doing it, and they've seen it work successfully. It's been a huge success. Unfortunately, our trucks can only go some routes. If we got a problem on the west side of the state, we've got to see the interstate I-17 and I-40 and others increase by 10,000 pounds in order to see that same savings that we're seeing on the east side of the state.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you're suggesting we could take advantage of existing infrastructure, the Forest Service, if they did a better job, Forest Service, in considering the cost of transportation. Given the locations of the mills, how would you suggest that they better incorporate transportation costs in their planning, for their planning purposes?
Yeah, I think you've raised an important point. This isn't any more dollars. These roads can handle. They're engineered to handle this kind of weight, and given this impact to the state, I think it would be a zero-cost proposition. But it's also important that the federal government, the National Forest, takes into consideration haul distances. So when they're offering products, they can't say, here's everything that's 100 miles from your mill. They have to take into consideration, we can share costs and spread costs, but we need stuff closer and stuff farther away, and there needs to be that balance in their planning.
Right. We've had issues in Arizona with the cost of doing NEPA, doing the prep work there required by NEPA to make sure that we have acreage that has passed the environmental test to be able to access and be treated. You mentioned in your testimony that we can't allow prep to be the new NEPA. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I can. Most states deal with getting NEPA-ready acres. We have over 500,000 NEPA-ready acres in Arizona, and by 2019, it'll be darn near 1 million. Now, what we have to do is make those acres available. And prep is becoming the new NEPA. The Forest Service is grossly out of date as it relates to technology and efforts to go paint every single tree is such a waste of time and resources. The technology is there and industry is pressing. We can, through GPS and tablet technology, tell you what we cut, how we cut it, when we cut it, where we cut it. And just provide designation by prescription or by diameter and let us go to work and save all of that money and make that acreage available. So absolutely, we cannot let prep become the old NEPA bottleneck in Arizona.
Right. Well, thank you. If I may, in Arizona, we have, with the ponderosa pine forest, a healthy forest has about 20 trees per acre. Traditionally, that's been, we have areas with 200 trees per acre. Can you talk some about the areas that you've been able to go in, the difference between that acreage in terms of fire hazard, fuels reduction you've been able to do compared to the old, or what we've seen over the past couple of decades?
You bet, Senator Flake. I'll increase that statistic. We have 2,000 trees per acre in some areas. And so we have a situation where we have a gross overgrown. Just think about being able to drive a covered wagon through the forests of Arizona. That's what they came into in the 1900s. Today, you couldn't drive a motorcycle through those forests. So we are significantly reducing. And if you ever walk onto a forest fire post-burn, what's left? What's left is the big trees. What burned to the ground was all of this high hazard fuel, all of this biomass. So when you now drive up the rim, which I know you do often, you can see through that forest again. And that's because of the work we're doing, not in removing big trees, but in removing trees that are 3 feet tall and 1 inch around, and doing that in a high scale and with mechanization in order to make it cost effective.
Well, thank you. Unless any of you want to answer questions on separation of powers or Chevron doctrine, I better get back into the other hearing. So, thank you.
Worsley, I'm the president and CEO of Novo Power. Biomass is very personal to me. In late 2000, my family completed the construction of a multi-generational home in the beautiful mountains of northern Arizona. In 2002, the Rodeo Chetasky fire ravaged over 500,000 acres of that forest, burning it to the ground, included in which was the acreage where our family home was built. This disaster, followed by the wildfire just 8 years later, highlighted a need for action. So we became educated on the subject. We procured a census done on the territory of Arizona in the 1900s, early 1900s, and we found that the acreage where our home existed traditionally held 5 to 15 trees per acre. Today, there are as many as 2,000 trees per acre. The same sunlight, the same water, the same nutrients. We have a very unhealthy forest. We were saddened by the inaction caused by the timber wars of the 80s and 90s, and we didn't agree with the U.S. government's policy on no fire. It was a God-given way to manage our forest, and for 100 years, we have reduced and limited that power and that cleansing mechanism. And because nothing was being done, we did something. And in 2008, we completed the construction of a biomass power plant, 28 megawatts in northern Arizona, Snowflake, Arizona. That facility today is the keystone of the needed infrastructure for forest restoration. You probably mostly have heard of the 4FRI project, the 4 Forest Restoration Initiative, the largest CFLR project in the country. That has a standing requirement of doing, or goal of doing 50,000 acres of mechanical thinning annually. Last year, we did 17,000 acres, and it was our best year. We are woefully behind in our attempts to get that work done. And it was the 17,000 acres that were done were because of the capacity generated by this singular biomass facility. We have about a third of the needed infrastructure in Arizona to manage our national forest. Now, I've looked at all types of technologies that can manage biomass, and I'm telling you, as my professional opinion, that the best way to do it is to touch it the very least amount of times, cut it, grind it, and make power from it. When we do that, we are significantly reducing the air quality issues that are generated in these mega fires that are happening in Arizona and across the western United States. We reduced by almost 98% the particulate matter that goes into the air while burned because of the systems that we have at our facility. We are also a huge resource in Arizona, potentially one of the only resources in restoring our national forest. 15,000 acres a year are treated and restored because of our facility. Mr. Treese here talked about the water infrastructure. What happens after forest fires is we silt out our dams and our reservoirs, and we spend decades spending exorbitant amount of money to treat that water post-forest fire. We also have a huge benefit as it relates to the renewable energy sector. We are a baseload power. That means that we stabilize the grid. I love solar and I love wind, but we are baseload and we don't destabilize that grid. We also have a huge economic impact. In my humble opinion, it's the most important 28 megawatts generated in Arizona of the 11 gigawatts of power because of the forest restoration, because of the watershed management. 1 million acres of the 4 million acres that we have in Arizona that were established to provide watershed to a desert have burned to the ground. We cannot afford to lose more watershed. These are the types of things that we do, but without your help, without help building the infrastructure, we're never going to get there. The east side of the state of Arizona runs without subsidy because we have the needed infrastructure. We have sawmills, we have pellet mills, we have a biomass facility. We do it without subsidy. It is not going to happen on the west side of the state unless there is some form of assistance. Now, what type of assistance am I talking about? We need to advance the pace and efficiency of U.S. Forest Service action. In Arizona, we have plenty of NEPA-ready acres, but we can't allow acre prep to become the new NEPA bottleneck. We need to ensure that biomass is considered a renewable power. We need regulatory certainty in that area. People like to argue over that. Well, certainly, as it relates to forest restoration, it is carbon neutral for what we're doing in preserving those things that are carbon receptors. We want to see fiscal incentive provided for biomass power to capture the real value it's giving to the state. It does more per megawatt than any other type of renewable power for the state infrastructure. We'd like to see something like 10% of firefighting spending in the previous year spent to prevent fires the next year. Last year we spent almost $1 billion, so how about $100 million to preserve our forests rather than burning them to the ground? We'd like to maybe see increased weight limits on U.S. highways, that for forest-related industries, it's 50% of the cost of removing that biomass, and a 5-ton increase, 90,000 pounds, allows for us to haul that material. The U.S. government could buy the power directly for their military bases. And then specifically in Arizona, we'd like to see a new RFP for 300,000 to 500,000 acres put out on the Forefry layout and footprint so that we can invite new investment. We can do this, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you.